So a couple of months ago, I asked this question in a video.
Guys, I feel like I should do a video on how to get the most out of the hypercars.
And the response was pretty strong. I think a lot of people would like to see a bit of a guide on hypercars in Le Mans Ultimate. It's a class I put quite a bit of time into throughout 2025. I've driven most hypercars a little bit. I haven't driven all of them. And then there's a couple of hypercars I've driven a lot, specifically the Toyota and the Ferrari. So yeah, I may not know absolutely everything, but I know enough to run at the front with the quickest drivers in Le Mans Ultimate in the hypercar. So hopefully in this video, there's enough information to give you guys some value. Because I don't know how realistic these hypercars are. I've never driven a real life hypercar, hopefully one day. But in terms of enjoyment, they're really good. So it is a shame that people are potentially missing out on experiencing these cars because they don't have enough info on how to drive them. So yeah, this video will knuckle down on hypercar specific tips. But if you want more of a general guide on how to set up Le Mans Ultimate, how I set up the game, then click on the card above. It will take you to that video. But yeah, for now, engage your brains. This is my hypercar guide on Le Mans Ultimate. Let's get into it. So then the first thing we're going to talk about is the battery. Now, this confused me at first. I think it confuses quite a lot of people as well. I think where a lot of people go wrong is they think it operates in the same way as an F1 car. However, the motor map setting, if you're using more of the battery in the hypercar, it does not give you more performance. It doesn't give you more power, acceleration, straight line speed. It doesn't give you any of that. The only thing that changes is the fuel efficiency. So if you're using more of the battery, you're going to be using less fuel and vice versa. But all you need to worry about as the driver is making sure that the battery never charges up fully, because if it does, under braking, it turns into an oversteery mess. And then from there, you just need to make sure that the battery's sort of in the middle of the range. And of course, the higher the motor map setting you're running, the faster it's going to drain the battery. So that's why you need to adjust that on the fly to keep that battery in the middle of the range. If you do accidentally drain the battery to 0%, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't become an undrivable mess. The only thing that changes is your fuel efficiency. Because you're using less of the battery because you've drained it to the bottom, your fuel efficiency is going to go up. So that's the only thing that changes really. So you don't have to worry too much about that. So another thing on the battery, so depending on the car you're driving, the battery will start deploying at a different speed. So in the LMH cars, the Ferrari or the Toyota, the battery starts deploying at around 190 kilometers an hour. In the Peugeot 9X8, it's around 150 kilometers an hour. And then in the LMDH cars, so the BMW or the Porsche, it starts deploying at 0, so straight away. And then the final thing you need to consider with the battery is how it affects the balance of the car. So in the LMH cars, the battery takes the power from the rear axle and applies it to the front. So this effectively means that the LMH cars are four-wheel drive over the threshold of 190 kilometers an hour. And so with that in mind, if the motor map is higher in value, it's going to shift the balance once you get over that speed. So in other words, in the high-speed corners, it's going to feel a little bit different depending on what your motor map setting is on. So for example, say you're in an LMH car at Le Mans and you're going through the Porsche curves and it's a little bit rear limited. If you increase the motor map value, it's going to give you more four-wheel drive effect from the front two tyres, and that's going to stabilise the rear. So I've done that in the middle of a race before where it has got a little bit rear limited. Usually at Le Mans with the low wing, it does feel a little bit sketchy. I've used the motor map to stabilise the car by giving me four-wheel drive. So it can be quite a useful tool for balancing the car. But yeah, crucial thing, it only changes the balance of the car when the battery's being deployed, so over that threshold speed. In LMDH, it's a little bit different. So all the power from the engine and the battery goes through the rear axle. It never has four-wheel drive. So yeah, it is a different kettle of fish depending on what hypercar you're driving. Moving on to the next topic then, which is braking. So it's no secret that braking in hypercar is obviously a lot harder than it is in GT3. A couple of reasons for that. Firstly, you're approaching the corners at a way higher speed. Secondly, you don't have ABS, so it's way easier to lock up. So yeah, here's a couple of things that will help you with your braking in these cars. The first thing is brake bias. So what I would do is purposefully go out on track, try and lock up, see what axles lock in first, the front or the rear, and adjust the brake bias until you find the sweet spot where you're locking both axles at the same time. The next thing I would adjust would be the max pedal force in the car setup. So what this does, if you max this setting out to 100%, the car has the most stopping potential it can have. The brakes are as aggressive as they can be. However, if you don't have an amazing brake technique or brake shape, it can lead to locking up quite easily. So yeah, if you do find yourself locking up more often than not and having little moments under braking, just decrease this setting a little bit, 1 or 2 clicks. And yeah, every click you turn it down, the brakes won't bite as hard initially under braking. Obviously you're losing a little bit of optimal performance, but it does make it a lot more consistent and a bit easier to drive. So yeah, with this setting for me, a lot of the time I end up running it around 99% or 98%, maybe even 97%. Say if the track's quite slippy, In the wet, I might turn it down a bit more. Yes, I'm sacrificing a little bit of optimal lap time, but it does make it way more drivable and way more consistent to drive on, which sometimes, especially in the endurance races, can be quite a good thing. But yeah, don't be afraid to go even lower than that if you are struggling. You just won't be able to brake as late as someone who's running that setting on 100%. And so the final thing with the braking in these cars is the brake technique itself. It's got to be a peaky brake shape. Hit the brakes hard initially and then trail off quite aggressively. And yeah, you need to do the majority of the braking in these cars early on with the downforce still working on the car. If you carry the brake deep into the corner like you would with a GT car, you're just going to run into loads of issues, locking up, having loads of little moments. The hypercar will not respond well to that driving style. And yeah, so there is a bit of an obvious point, but there's a far bigger price to pay if you get the braking wrong in this car versus a GT car with ABS. Instead of leaning into the ABS, you're going to lock up, which will result potentially in a half spin or even a full spin and then a crash. So it's very cutthroat. There's no getting away from that. Even when I get it wrong, it ends badly. But all you can do is do the fundamentals correctly and hope it works out okay. So the three things then, so brake bias, max pedal force, and brake technique with a peaky brake shape. If you get those three things right, you should be okay. So yeah, with my SimCube Active pedals, more specifically the brake, they allow me to feel a little bit more as well, which does give me a little helping hand. So I've enabled the brake lockup effect. That's what it's called, brake lockup. And so I can feel quite clearly on my left foot just when the tyres, front or rear, are about to lock. So this definitely helps me identify the lockup earlier, as opposed to seeing it or hearing it. I can actually feel it on my left foot and I can react like instantaneously. So yeah, it definitely gives me a little helping hand in these hypercars. Of course, that's not realistic, but for the sim, it does help a fair bit. And then yeah, one more final thing for the braking in these cars. So the fuel load makes a massive difference to the braking. The effect the weight has on the car is massive. So you can brake a lot later in these cars on low fuel versus high fuel. So when you go from quali to race, you need to pull back the braking a good few meters, 10, 20 meters for every corner, because yeah, with that extra weight, the car just does not stop. Quick one, I just wanted to let you guys know, just give you the heads up that I do now offer sim racing coaching. So I have done since the beginning of 2024, and it's been really interesting actually to try and help people get a little bit faster, a bit more consistent. And up until that point, my sole focus with sim racing was making myself better. Very narcissistic, you could say. But yeah, since coaching over 100 people in the last year and a half, I actually think it's made me a better driver, just from assessing and understanding things a little bit more. Whereas before I was purely driving on instinct, so there wasn't really too much going on up here, which may or may not surprise some of you. So then within Sim Elite Coaching, which is what I've called it, there's myself and Bono House, who's another sim racer who's achieved a lot in his sim racing career. And as both of us are of a similar age, we're both getting on a bit these days, we definitely both enjoy passing on some of that knowledge we've gathered throughout the years onto others to help them improve. So yeah, the link will be down in the description below if you're interested in checking that out. And yeah, maybe see some of you in a coaching session soon at some point. But yeah, back to the video. Right, so back to the hypercars. The next thing I want to touch on is the throttle. So I have found with the hypercars in this game that they love an aggressive throttle input from the driver. So not much progression. It's either on or off, like a switch. And so with my SimCube Active pedals, or more specifically my throttle pedal profile, in terms of the pedal travel itself, I've made that shorter compared with other throttle profiles that I use for other cars on other games. So it allows me to get to full throttle quicker, and it allows me to come off it as well. So it gives me that switch feeling, which definitely helps in these cars. The next little tip we'll talk about is around the race start. So yeah, because these cars don't run tyre warmers, along with the fact they've got almost 700 horsepower, nearly 1,000 newton meters of torque, it can be quite hard to get all that power down in one go. So there definitely is a sweet spot when it comes to the traction control in these cars for the race starts. Of course, too much TC and the car's going to bog down, too little TC and you're going to wheel spin. So what I do is I play around with the TC cut setting. So for the Ferrari, I run it on TC cut 3. For the Toyota, it's TC cut 2. Of course, there are other variables at play as well. You know, the track grip, the track temperature, the weather conditions, they all have an effect on what TC will work for the race start. But yeah, you can gain a fair amount from tweaking this setting on the race start, which obviously is such a crucial point in the race. Also at the race starts, make sure you're brake dragging on the way to the lights to get your brake temps up so you can brake nice and late into turn 1, otherwise you'll have cold brakes. Try and avoid slowing down and accelerating too much on the lead up to the green lights, because you will eat up quite a lot of virtual energy. If you just sit there on the pit speed limiter, it'll use up the fuel, which is what you want, so you can save as much VE as possible for the race. And yeah, that's going to allow you to extend your stint as long as possible, providing you've got the fuel ratio right, of course. Next, we will chat about car setups. So to begin with, I just bought them from setup shops, and that was a pretty good place to start. Most setup shops get the cars in a decent enough window, so you have the foundations in the right place. But I guess the non-negotiables, in my experience at least, with the hypercars on Le Mans Ultimate from a car setup point of view would be having the regen level on maximum. I've never run this lower than maximum. Having the motor map on maximum, so it drains the battery immediately after leaving the pits. The brake migration should be all the way forward. You'd ideally run soft springs all round, so front and rear. Running a fair amount of rake in the car generally is pretty good, so low front ride height, high rear ride height. No toe angles front or rear, or very little toe angle at least. And then yeah, everything else can vary quite a lot. But the things I've just mentioned, in my experience, have generally stayed the same for the most part. I guess out of all the setup pages, in terms of importance, where are you going to find the lap time? I would definitely prioritize the suspension page. That's where I think you're going to find time in the setup. So yeah, definitely prioritize that page. So then final thing, a few little random tips for the hypercars. The first thing is the force feedback. It's a little bit weaker in the hypercars than it is in the GT3s or the LMP2s, so I have to go up a couple of clicks when I'm going from those cars into a hypercar. The oil temperature limit is 130 degrees Celsius, so at that point the car will start smoking and eventually it will blow up. The water temperature limit is 110 degrees Celsius, around that figure. On the topic of temperatures, if you damage the front of the car, it can block those radiators and therefore those temps will go up, and again, it can result in the car smoking and blowing up. So I think it's really cool that they simulate little things like that. I've actually fallen foul of that one in the past, which was annoying. Also on this topic, the oil radiator is sat behind the water radiator in the hypercars. So if you adjust the water radiator blanking, it will also affect the oil temperature as well. So it's just good to know that. Again, I think it's so cool that this game simulates little things like that. I love bits like that. Proper nerd. As I said way earlier in the video, these cars don't run tyre warmers, so your tyre temperature when you leave the pit box will be exactly the same as the air temperature of the server. So just so you know how much temperature you've got in your tyres before you go out on track. Right, well, there you go. That is everything I know on the hypercars in Le Mans Ultimate. So hopefully you found it useful. Let me know down in the comments below if you have any more questions on the hypercars in Le Mans Ultimate. Equally, if you think I've missed anything, also let me know down in the comments below, because I'm always trying to learn. There are a couple of areas I've left out of this video, so those two areas are wet weather driving and strategy. I've left out wet weather driving because I've just not done enough of it in Le Mans Ultimate yet to really give out advice. And then on the strategy front, I still have a lot of work to do in this area myself, so I don't feel comfortable giving out tips in that area when I'm making so many stupid mistakes myself. So yeah, maybe we'll touch on wet weather and strategy down the line at some point. But yeah, for this video, I hope you enjoyed it. Give it a like and subscribe if you did. If you fancy checking out another one of my tutorial style videos, click here and I'll catch you all on the next one. So take care, goodbye.